She fell into his lap during the most dangerous meeting of her life. And when the city's most feared crime boss leaned in and whispered, "Don't you dare leave," Evelyn Carter's carefully constructed invisibility shattered in an instant. What happened next would either destroy her or make her untouchable. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. Now, let me take you back to the moment everything changed. The conference room on the 42nd floor smelled like expensive leather and bad decisions. Evelyn Carter knew this because she'd spent the last 6 months memorizing every detail of Adrian Volkov's world, the kind of knowledge that kept assistants alive in an empire built on shadows and silence. She knew which brand of whiskey sat untouched in the crystal decanters. She knew the exact temperature he preferred the room kept at. She knew that when his jaw tightened just slightly on the left side, someone was about to have a very bad day. What she didn't know was that her left heel had a hairline crack in it. Not until it was too late. The meeting had been running for 90 minutes. Evelyn stood near the back wall with her tablet, taking notes with the kind of mechanical precision that made her invisible, exactly how she liked it. Around the table sat 8 men who collectively controlled enough of the city's underground economy to make politicians nervous and federal agents careful. They wore $1,000 suits and watches that cost more than most people's cars, but underneath the polish, they were predators. Every single one of them. And at the head of the table sat the apex predator himself. Adrian Volkov didn't look like what people expected. No facial scars, no gold chains, no theatrical displays of violence. He was 34, dark-haired, and possessed the kind of cold, classical features that belonged on currency or courthouse sculptures. He wore a simple black suit, no tie, and a watch that was expensive because of its mechanics, not its flash. When he spoke, people leaned in. When he went silent, people held their breath. Evelyn had learned to read him the way sailors learn to read the sea, out of pure survival instinct. Right now, his attention was fixed on Marcus Chen, who sat 3 seats down and was making the fatal mistake of lying about shipment numbers. Evelyn could see it in the way Adrian's fingers had stopped moving on the table, in the slight narrowing of his eyes, in the particular quality of silence that had settled over the room like a held blade. She was so focused on watching the disaster unfold that she didn't notice her own. Adrian had asked for the quarterly reports. Evelyn moved forward from her position by the wall, tablet in hand, weaving carefully between the chairs toward the head of the table. She'd done this 100 times. It was routine, muscle memory. 3 steps from Adrian's chair, her heel caught. The crack she'd failed to notice finally gave way. For one absurd, suspended moment, Evelyn felt herself tilting sideways, her weight shifting in a direction her body couldn't correct. Her tablet slipped from her hands. The room tilted. She heard someone's chair scrape back, and then she fell directly into Adrian Volkov's lap. Time did something strange. Evelyn's hands had instinctively reached out to catch herself, which meant one palm landed on Adrian's chest and the other gripped his shoulder. Her face was inches from his, close enough to see the exact shade of his eyes, dark gray, like smoke over steel. Close enough to smell cedar and something sharper underneath. Close enough to realize that the most dangerous man she'd ever met had gone completely, utterly still. The entire room had frozen. 8 of the city's most ruthless power brokers stared at the scene with expressions ranging from shock to poorly concealed schadenfreude. Marcus Chen looked like Christmas had come early. Someone else was about to become the center of Adrian Volkov's attention, and it wasn't him. Evelyn's mind kicked into crisis mode. She needed to move, needed to apologize, needed to get off his lap before— "Don't!" Adrian's voice was quiet. Just one word, barely above a whisper, but it cut through her spiraling thoughts like a knife. His hand had come up to her waist. Not grabbing, not pulling, just resting there with enough pressure to keep her exactly where she was. His eyes hadn't left hers. "Don't you dare leave," he said, and there was something in his voice that Evelyn couldn't identify. Something that made her pulse spike for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. She should have been terrified. She was terrified. But underneath the terror was something else entirely, something hot and electric that she had absolutely no business feeling while sitting in her boss's lap in front of 8 witnesses who would happily use this against both of them. "Mr. Volkov," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm sorry, my heel broke." His thumb moved slightly against her waist. Just a fraction of an inch, but she felt it like a brand through the fabric of her blouse. I noticed. Of course he had. Adrian Volkov noticed everything. You need to stay exactly where you are until I'm finished speaking, Adrian said, his eyes still locked on hers. Then, without breaking eye contact, he raised his voice to address the room. Gentlemen, where were we? The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn's mind reeled. He wasn't letting her go. He was keeping her here, in his lap, in front of everyone, as if this were completely normal. As if she hadn't just committed what should have been a career-ending mistake at best and a life-ending one at worst. Slowly, she became aware of other details. The warmth of his body beneath her, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way his hand remained on her waist, possessive, protective, and completely inexplicable. The leather of his chair creaked slightly as he shifted his weight, adjusting to accommodate hers with the kind of easy confidence that suggested he saw absolutely nothing wrong with the current situation. Marcus. Adrian's attention shifted to the man who'd been lying about the shipment numbers. His tone could have frozen blood. You were explaining the discrepancy in the manifests. Marcus Chen had gone pale. Yes, sir. There was a... Stop. Adrian's hand tightened fractionally on Evelyn's waist, and she realized with a start that she'd begun to shift away. His eyes flicked back to her for just a second, a warning and something else she couldn't name, then back to Marcus. Do you think I'm stupid, Marcus? No, sir, of course not. Then don't insult me with explanations a child could see through. Adrian's voice remained perfectly level, which somehow made it worse. The shipments were short by 30%. That's not a discrepancy. That's theft. The room got colder. Evelyn knew she should be focusing on the meeting, on the corporate warfare playing out in front of her, but her brain had apparently decided to betray her. All she could focus on was the man beneath her, the way his chest rose and fell, the faint scent of cedar that clung to him, the absolutely unacceptable fact that some traitorous part of her didn't want to move. She'd worked for Adrian Volkov for 6 months and had successfully maintained professional distance through sheer force of will. She'd watched him destroy competitors, seal deals worth millions, and command absolute loyalty from dangerous men without ever once letting herself wonder what it would be like to be the focus of all that intensity. Now she knew. It was terrifying, exhilarating, completely inappropriate. And from the way his thumb was tracing slow, absent circles against her waist, so subtle, she wasn't sure he even realized he was doing it. She wasn't the only one affected. The discrepancy was unintentional, Marcus was saying, sweat visible on his forehead now. A clerical error in the... Evelyn. She jumped slightly at hearing her name. Adrian's eyes were back on her, unreadable and intense. Yes, sir? Pull up the Chen manifest from March through June, all of them. Her tablet. She'd dropped it when she fell. She looked around and spotted it on the floor, about 3 feet away, screen miraculously intact. It's... She started to move, but Adrian's hand tightened again. James, Adrian said without looking away from her. Get Ms. Carter's tablet. One of the men at the table, James Reeves, head of logistics, immediately retrieved it and held it out. Evelyn took it with a murmured, thank you, hyper-aware that her hands were shaking slightly. She pulled up the files, her fingers moving on autopilot while her brain tried to process the fact that she was still in Adrian's lap, that his hand was still on her waist, that the entire room was pretending this was somehow normal while simultaneously filing away every detail for future use. March shows full delivery, she said, forcing her voice into professional territory. April as well. May is when the discrepancies start. 15% short. June is 30% short. And the signed receipts? She scrolled. All showing full delivery, signed by... She paused, checking the signatures. Signed by Marcus Chen. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell over. Those signatures are forged. Someone is setting me up. Sit down. Adrian didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. You're embarrassing yourself. Mr. Volkov, please, I would never... You would. You did. And now you're going to tell me where my merchandise went, who you sold it to, and how much they paid you for the privilege of making me look like a fool. Evelyn had seen Adrian handle business before, but never this close. Never while she could feel the controlled tension in his body, the way his muscles tightened beneath her like a predator preparing to strike. His voice remained calm, almost gentle, which made it infinitely more threatening. "I need 48 hours, Marcus said, his voice breaking slightly. "Please, I can fix this. I can make it right." "You had 6 months to make it right. You chose to make it worse." Adrian's thumb stopped moving on Evelyn's waist. "You have until noon tomorrow to return what you stole and provide a full accounting of your transactions. After that, we'll discuss terms of your departure from this organization." Departure was a generous word for what happened to people who stole from Adrian Volkov. Marcus looked like he might be sick. "Mr. Volkov, noon tomorrow, Marcus. Don't be late." Adrian's attention shifted to the rest of the table. "Does anyone else have discrepancies they'd like to discuss before I start auditing every operation in this room?" 8 heads shook in unison. "Excellent. We're done here." Adrian's hand finally left Evelyn's waist, and she felt the absence like a physical thing. "Everyone out? Except you, Miss Carter." The room cleared in under 30 seconds. Even Marcus, who looked like he wanted to argue, thought better of it and fled. The door clicked shut, leaving Evelyn alone with Adrian in the sudden, heavy silence. She should move, should get off his lap immediately and apologize profusely and pray he didn't fire her, should do literally anything except continue sitting here like she had every right to be exactly where she was. But Adrian's hand had returned to her waist, and this time there was nothing absent or unconscious about it. "Your heel," he said quietly. "It broke. I'm so sorry. I'm not talking about the heel." His other hand came up to her chin, tilting her face slightly so she had no choice but to meet his eyes. "I'm talking about what happens next." Evelyn's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. "I don't understand." "Yes, you do." His thumb brushed along her jawline, and she felt the touch everywhere. "You've been very careful these past 6 months. Very professional, very invisible. That's my job." "Your job is to be my executive secretary. Your choice was to hide." His eyes searched hers, looking for something. "Why?" "Because you're dangerous," she thought. "Because people who get too close to you end up destroyed or owned or both. Because I watched what happened to the last assistant who looked at you wrong." "Because it's safer," she said instead. "Safer." He repeated the word like he was testing it. "And how did that work out for you?" Despite everything, Evelyn almost laughed. "Not well, apparently." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "No, not well." His hand was still on her face, some thumb tracing patterns that were doing dangerous things to her ability to think clearly. "Here's what's going to happen, Evelyn. You're going to stand up. You're going to go home. You're going to think very carefully about whether you want to keep hiding. And if I do, then Monday morning we'll both pretend this never happened. You'll go back to being invisible, and I'll go back to pretending I don't notice you." His eyes darkened. "But if you don't?" He left the sentence hanging. An invitation and a threat and a promise all at once. "This isn't appropriate," Evelyn said, even as every nerve in her body screamed at her to lean closer. "You're my boss. This is complicated, dangerous, completely inadvisable." His thumb traced her lower lip and she forgot how to breathe. "I'm aware. The question is whether you care." She should care. Should care desperately about the professional boundaries being obliterated, about the power dynamic, about the fact that Adrian Volkov's world ate people alive and spit out the bones. But his hand was warm on her face, and his eyes were looking at her like she was something rare and worth keeping, and for 6 months she'd been so careful, so controlled, so invisible that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. "I should go," she whispered. "Yes, you should." But he didn't move his hand. Neither did she. They stayed like that for a long moment, her in his lap, his hand on her face, the city sprawling 42 floors below them in the fading afternoon light. The moment stretched taut between them, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. Then Adrian's hand dropped away, and the spell broke. "Go home, Evelyn." His voice had returned to its usual controlled tone, but she could hear something underneath it now, something that matched the heat still burning in his eyes. "Think about what you want. Monday morning, you decide." Evelyn stood on shaking legs, hyper-aware of how the loss of contact felt like a physical ache. Her broken heel made her list slightly to one side. Adrian noticed immediately. "Take my car," he said. "I'll have someone bring yours around tomorrow." "That's not necessary, Evelyn." He stood as well, and suddenly the space between them felt both too large and not nearly large enough. "Take the car. Let me do this one thing without arguing." She should argue anyway, should maintain boundaries, keep distance, remember all the very good reasons why this was a terrible idea. Instead, she nodded. "Good." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. "Victor will meet you downstairs. He'll take you wherever you need to go." "Thank you." She turned to leave, made it 3 steps toward the door before his voice stopped her. "Evelyn?" She looked back. Adrian stood silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city a glittering backdrop behind him. Powerful. Dangerous. Looking at her like she was a puzzle he'd just decided to solve. "Monday morning," he said quietly. "Choose carefully." The elevator ride down felt surreal. Evelyn stared at her reflection in the polished doors, trying to reconcile the professional woman in the mirror with the person who'd just spent 15 minutes in Adrian Volkov's lap. Her hair was still neat, her blouse was still tucked in. She looked exactly the same as she had this morning. But something fundamental had shifted. Victor was waiting in the lobby exactly as Adrian had promised. He was one of Adrian's personal security team, 6'4", former military, the kind of man who could kill you 17 different ways and would do it without hesitation if Adrian gave the word. "Ms. Carter," he nodded respectfully. "Where to?" Evelyn gave him her address, then settled into the back of Adrian's car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than she made in a year. The leather seats were soft. The interior smelled like the cedar scent she'd noticed on Adrian himself. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about how his hand had felt on her waist. She failed spectacularly. The drive to her apartment took 20 minutes through downtown traffic. Evelyn spent the entire time replaying the meeting in her head, examining it from every angle, trying to understand what had just happened. Adrian Volkov had kept her in his lap, had touched her face, had looked at her like what? Like she was something he wanted? Like she was more than just his secretary? And worse, so much worse, she'd wanted him to. That was the part that terrified her, not the professional implications or the dangerous position she'd just put herself in. But the fact that when his hand had been on her waist, when his thumb had traced her lip, when he'd looked at her with those smoke-gray eyes, every rational thought in her head had evaporated. She'd wanted to lean in, to close that final distance, to find out what would happen if she stopped hiding and let herself want something dangerous. Victor pulled up in front of her building, a modest brownstone in a neighborhood that was trying very hard to gentrify. "I'll wait until you're inside," he said. "That's not necessary." He gave her a look that suggested it absolutely was necessary, and also that arguing would be futile. Evelyn let herself into her apartment and watched from the window as Victor pulled away. Only then did she let herself collapse onto her couch and try to process the impossible situation she'd fallen into. Literally fallen into. Her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend Rachel. "Drinks tonight? I need to complain about my boss." Evelyn stared at the message. What would she even say? "Can't tonight. I need to process the fact that I accidentally fell into my crime boss employer's lap, and now he's giving me until Monday to decide if I want to start something that will probably get me killed." She texted back, "Rain check? Long week." Rachel's response was immediate. "You okay?" "Yeah, just tired." It wasn't entirely a lie. She was tired. Tired of being careful. Tired of being invisible. Tired of pretending she hadn't noticed the way Adrian looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. Tired of ignoring the pull she felt every time she was in the same room as him. 6 months of exhausting, relentless self-control, and it had all crumbled because of a broken heel. Evelyn kicked off her shoes, both of them, and stared at the broken one like it had personally betrayed her. In a way it had. That tiny crack had upended her entire carefully constructed existence. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She opened the message and felt her heart stop. "Monday morning, Evelyn. But if you need more time, take it." He'd given her his personal number, or had someone give it to her. Either way, the message was clear. The ball was in her court now. Evelyn typed and deleted 3 different responses before giving up. What could she possibly say? Thank you for not firing me after I fell into your lap. Sorry for the sexual tension that nearly set that conference room on fire. Please tell me I'm not imagining this. Instead, she set the phone down and tried to think rationally. Adrian Volkov was dangerous. Everyone knew it. He ran an empire built on ventures that existed in the gray spaces between legal and criminal, and the people who crossed him had a tendency to disappear. He was ruthless, calculating, and absolutely not the kind of man a smart woman would get involved with. But he'd also been gentle when his hand touched her face, had given her a choice when he could have simply taken what he wanted, had looked at her like she mattered, and that was perhaps the most dangerous thing of all. Evelyn spent the weekend in a state of suspended agitation. She cleaned her apartment 3 times, went for long runs that did nothing to clear her head, avoided Rachel's increasingly concerned texts, stared at Adrian's message until she had it memorized. Monday morning, Evelyn. Saturday night, she dreamed about smoke-gray eyes and hands on her waist and whispered words that felt like promises. She woke up Sunday morning with her heart racing and the absolute certainty that she'd already made her decision. The question wasn't whether she wanted Adrian Volkov. The question was whether she was brave enough to stop hiding. But Monday morning arrived with merciless punctuality. Evelyn stood in front of her closet for 15 minutes, trying to decide what you wore when you were about to either start something dangerous or definitively end it. In the end, she chose a deep blue dress that was professional but not armor, heels that were lower, and, she checked carefully, structurally sound. The elevator ride up to the 42nd floor felt like ascending to her own execution. The office was already busy when she arrived. People nodded respectfully as she passed, giving her the same deference they always had. No knowing looks, no whispers. Either word of Friday's incident hadn't spread, or everyone was too smart to acknowledge it. Adrian's office door was closed. Evelyn could see through the glass walls that he was on a call, pacing in front of the windows with the phone to his ear. He looked tired, angry, dangerous. He looked like everything she shouldn't want. She sat at her desk and pulled up the day's schedule, forcing herself to focus on work. Adrian had back-to-back meetings until 2, then a conference call with London, then his office door opened. Evelyn, a moment. It wasn't a request. She stood, smoothed her dress, and walked into his office, with her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. Adrian closed the door behind her and gestured to the chair across from his desk. She didn't sit. Neither did he. They stood there in the morning light, the city stretching out behind him, and Evelyn realized that this was it. The moment of choice. The point of no return. Did you think about it? Adrian asked quietly. I didn't think about anything else. And? Evelyn took a breath, let it out slowly, stepped forward into the space between them. Not far, just enough to make her intentions clear. I'm tired of hiding, she said. Something fierce and triumphant flashed in Adrian's eyes. Good. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hand coming up to cup her face the way he had on Friday. And this time when his thumb traced her lip, she didn't think about professionalism or consequences or danger. She just leaned in. The kiss was inevitable, like gravity or sunrise or the way lost things eventually find their way home. His mouth found hers with a certainty that suggested he'd been thinking about this just as much as she had, and the world narrowed down to this. The taste of him, the warmth of his hand sliding into her hair, the way her own hands fisted in his shirt like she was afraid he might disappear. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. This is going to be complicated, he said. I know. People will talk, some will try to use it against us. I know. And I'm not... He pulled back just enough to look at her, his expression serious. I'm not an easy man, Evelyn. My world isn't safe. Getting close to me means accepting risks most people wouldn't touch. I know that too. She met his eyes steadily. I'm choosing it anyway. His hand tightened in her hair. Why? Because you see me, she thought. Because when I fell into your lap, you didn't let me fall alone. Because for 6 months I've been half alive, and Friday afternoon I felt like I could finally breathe. Because I'm tired of being safe, she said instead. And because you looked at me like I was worth the risk. Adrian kissed her again, slower this time, thorough and possessive and full of dark promise. When he pulled away, his eyes held something that looked almost like relief. "We do this carefully," he said. "I won't have you made into a target because of me." "Okay. And Evelyn?" His thumb traced her cheekbone. "When this becomes public, and it will, there will be fallout. People will assume things about you, about us, about why I promoted you." "You haven't promoted me. Not yet." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "But I'm not keeping you as my secretary, Evelyn. You're too smart for that, too capable. I've been watching you for 6 months, and I know exactly what you're worth." Her heart did something complicated. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that starting today, you're my executive partner, equal authority on all non-operational decisions. Your own office, your own team, a seat at the table when it matters." Evelyn stared at him. "Adrian, this isn't because I want you in my bed, though I absolutely do." His expression went serious. "This is because you're wasted taking notes in the corner. You see patterns other people miss. You think 3 steps ahead, and you've been hiding all of that behind efficiency and invisibility for half a year." He stepped closer. "No more hiding, remember? Not from them, and not from yourself. People will say you're only doing this because we're—" She gestured between them. "Let them. I don't build my organization on other people's opinions." His hand slid down to her waist, pulling her closer. "But I'm also not stupid, Evelyn. This—" His thumb brushed her hip. "Stays between us until you're established, until no one can question whether you earned your place. Then I'll make it very clear to everyone exactly where we stand." It was careful, strategic, the kind of thinking that had built Adrian's empire. It was also protection, for her, from the inevitable fallout. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay." He kissed her forehead, a gesture that was somehow more intimate than everything that had come before. "Now go. We have a meeting in 20 minutes, and I need you sharp." "Adrian?" He looked at her. "Thank you for giving me the choice." Something soft crossed his face. "Always, Evelyn. However this unfolds, you always have a choice." She left his office feeling like she'd just stepped off a cliff and discovered she could fly. The day blurred past in a rush of activity. Adrian announced her promotion in the afternoon meeting with the same casual authority he used for everything else. There were surprised looks, a few calculating ones, but no one was stupid enough to question him directly. Marcus Chen didn't show up for his noon deadline. By 2 o'clock, word had quietly spread that he'd left the city entirely. Smart man. Evelyn spent the afternoon setting up her new office and trying not to think about Adrian's hands on her waist. She failed at the second part almost immediately. At 6:30, after most of the office had cleared out, Adrian appeared in her doorway. "Dinner," he said simply. "Is that a question or a command?" "With you?" "Always a question." She saved her work and stood. "Where?" "Somewhere private." His eyes held promise. "We have a lot to talk about." They took his car to a restaurant Evelyn had never heard of, the kind of place that didn't advertise because it didn't need to, the kind where the host recognized Adrian immediately and led them to a private room in the back without being asked. Over wine and food that Evelyn barely tasted, they talked. Not about work, not about strategy or complications or what came next. Just talked. About books they'd read and places they wanted to visit and childhood memories that had shaped them. Evelyn learned that Adrian had grown up poor, that his father had disappeared when he was 7, that he'd built his empire from nothing, through sheer force of will and carefully applied intelligence, that he played piano when he needed to think, that he'd been engaged once, years ago, to a woman who'd wanted the power but not the reality of his world. "What happened?" Evelyn asked. "She left. Found someone safer." Adrian's fingers traced the rim of his wine glass. "I didn't blame her. This life isn't for everyone." "Do you regret it?" "No." He looked at her directly. "I regret not seeing it sooner, not being honest about what I could offer." His hand found hers across the table. "I won't make that mistake with you, Evelyn. This is who I am, what I do, the world I live in. If that's not something you can accept, I'm here, aren't I? For now." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But this is still new, still easy. When it gets hard, and it will, I need to know you won't run." Evelyn thought about that. about the risks and the danger and all the very logical reasons she should walk away, about the fact that she'd spent 6 months being careful and invisible and safe, and it had felt like slowly suffocating. "I won't run," she said quietly. "I'm not saying this will be easy or that I won't be scared sometimes, but I've already made my choice, Adrian. I'm choosing you, the real you, whatever that means." He stood, pulling her up with him, and kissed her like he was sealing a promise. When they finally broke apart, his eyes were dark with want. "Come home with me," he said. Not a command, a request, an invitation into his private space, his real life, the parts of himself he kept locked away from everyone else. "Yes," Evelyn said simply. They left the restaurant and drove through the city in comfortable silence, his hand finding hers in the space between them. Adrian's penthouse was in the tallest building downtown, 52 floors above the streets. The elevator required a key. The doors opened directly into his home. Evelyn had expected luxury. She got something more intimate than that. Yes, the furniture was expensive and the view was breathtaking, but there were also stacks of books on every surface, a piano in the corner covered with handwritten sheet music, photographs on the walls that showed a life lived fully. "This is beautiful," she said. "This is real." Adrian shrugged off his jacket, loosened his tie. "Everything else is performance. This is just mine." And he was letting her in. The weight of that settled over Evelyn like a benediction. This wasn't just about attraction or chemistry or the pull between them. This was Adrian choosing to trust her with the parts of himself he kept hidden, choosing to let her see the human underneath the reputation. She turned to him and found him watching her with an expression that made her heart ache. "I'm not good at this," he said quietly. "At being open, vulnerable. Most people only ever see what I let them see. What do you want me to see?" He crossed to her slowly, hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything the world thought they knew about Adrian Volkov. "Everything," he said. "I want you to see everything. And I want—" He stopped, something uncertain crossing his face. "What?" "I want you to stay anyway." Evelyn understood then. This wasn't just about her choosing him, it was about him choosing to be chosen. Choosing to believe that someone could see all of who he was, the power and the danger and the darkness, and decide he was worth it anyway. She reached up and pulled his mouth down to hers, kissing him with all the certainty she felt. When she pulled back, his eyes had darkened with something that looked like hope. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Evelyn felt the last of her reservations crumble away. This was reckless and dangerous, and probably the worst decision she'd ever made. It was also the first time in years she'd felt completely, entirely alive. Adrian's hand slid into her hair, down her back, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. Evelyn's own hands found the buttons of his shirt, working them open with fingers that trembled slightly. Not from fear, from want. "Evelyn," his voice was rough. "If we do this—" "We're already doing this," she said against his mouth. "We have been since Friday, maybe even before that." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes searching. "You're sure?" "I'm terrified," she admitted, "but I'm sure." That was apparently all he needed to hear. Adrian lifted her easily, her legs wrapping around his waist instinctively, and carried her toward the bedroom. The kiss never broke. Neither did eye contact when he finally set her down and stood back, giving her one last chance to change her mind. Evelyn reached for the zipper of her dress. She didn't change her mind. What followed was inevitable and necessary, and absolutely nothing like she'd imagined. Adrian was careful at first, almost reverent, like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. But Evelyn didn't want careful. She wanted real. "Don't," she said when he pulled back slightly. "Don't treat me like I'm fragile. I'm not." Something fierce flashed in his eyes. "No, you're not." He kissed her harder then, deeper, and Evelyn gave back everything he offered. They came together like a collision, urgent and desperate and absolutely right. And when Adrian finally collapsed beside her, both of them breathing hard, Evelyn felt something slot into place in her chest. This was what she'd been missing. Not just the physical, though that had been extraordinary, but the connection. The certainty of being seen and chosen and wanted for exactly who she was. Adrian pulled her against his chest, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Stay," he murmured into her hair. "Tonight. Tomorrow. As long as you want." Evelyn thought about her empty apartment, her careful life, all the reasons she should probably leave and establish boundaries and not rush into whatever this was. She thought about how his heartbeat sounded against her ear. "Okay," she said. She felt him smile. They fell asleep tangled together, and Evelyn's last conscious thought was that she'd finally stopped falling. She'd landed exactly where she belonged. Morning came too early and not early enough. Evelyn woke to unfamiliar light slanting through floor-to-ceiling windows and the warm weight of Adrian's arm across her waist. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back. The restaurant, the penthouse, the way he'd looked at her like she was something worth keeping, the way she'd stayed. Adrian was still asleep, his face relaxed in a way she'd never seen during business hours. He looked younger like this, less dangerous. Though Evelyn knew better than to mistake sleep for softness, the man beside her had built an empire on calculated ruthlessness, and one night in his bed didn't change that. What it did change was her. She'd crossed a line last night that couldn't be uncrossed, had chosen something dangerous over something safe. And lying here in the early morning light, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, Evelyn couldn't bring herself to regret it. Adrian's eyes opened, immediately alert despite the early hour. His gaze found hers, and something warm settled in his expression. "Morning," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Hi." His arm tightened around her waist, pulling her closer. "Any regrets? Ask me again after coffee." He laughed. Actual laughter, low and genuine, and Evelyn felt something flutter in her chest. This was the Adrian no one else got to see, the one who existed outside the conference rooms and power plays. "Come on." He pressed a kiss to her shoulder and sat up. "I'll make breakfast." "You cook?" "I survive. There's a difference." He pulled on pants and headed toward what she assumed was the kitchen, pausing in the doorway. "How do you take your coffee?" "Black." "2 sugars." He nodded and disappeared, leaving Evelyn alone in his bedroom. She took the opportunity to actually look around. The space was surprisingly sparse. Expensive furniture, yes, but minimal. No clutter. No personal effects except for a single photograph on the nightstand. She picked it up carefully. A younger Adrian, maybe 20, standing next to a woman who had his eyes. Both of them smiling at whoever held the camera. "My mother." Evelyn jumped slightly. Adrian had returned with 2 mugs, his expression unreadable as he looked at the photo in her hands. "She's beautiful," Evelyn said. "Was. She died 8 years ago." He handed her a mug, then took the frame from her and studied it for a moment before setting it back down. "Heart attack. Quick. She didn't suffer." "I'm sorry." "Don't be." She lived exactly the life she wanted. He sat on the edge of the bed, his free hand finding hers. "She would have liked you, I think. She always said I needed someone who wouldn't put up with my bullshit." "Is that what I am? Someone who doesn't put up with your bullshit?" "Among other things." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "She also said I'd know when I found the right person because I'd stop trying to control everything." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "And have you? With you? I'm trying." He looked at her seriously. "Last night I meant what I said, about wanting you to see everything, about this being real." "I know." "Good." He kissed her knuckles, a gesture that was somehow more intimate than anything they'd done in the dark. "Because I don't do this, Evelyn. I don't bring people here. Don't let them see the parts of me that aren't useful for business." "Why me?" He considered the question for a long moment. "Because you fell into my lap and looked at me like I was a man instead of a monster. Because you've been hiding just as much as I have. Because when I told you to stay, you did. You gave me a choice. And you chose me anyway." His eyes held hers. "That matters." They finished their coffee in comfortable silence. Then Adrian reluctantly announced that they both needed to get ready for work. Evelyn borrowed his shower, noting the obscenely expensive products that smelled like cedar, and put on yesterday's dress with the uncomfortable awareness that she was about to do the walk of shame through Adrian's office building. "Stop," Adrian said, appearing behind her in the mirror as she tried to make her hair look less like she'd spent the night being thoroughly ravished. "Stop what?" Worrying about what people will think. His hand settled on her shoulders. You're my executive partner now, remember? Sometimes we work late. Sometimes we work early. Let them think whatever they want. Easy for you to say. You're the boss. So are you. He turned her to face him. Evelyn, I meant what I said yesterday. You're not my secretary anymore. You're not my employee in any traditional sense. You're my partner. Equal voice, equal authority. The only difference is I've been doing this longer. The difference is you own the company. The difference is I'm willing to share it. His expression went serious. I'm not asking you to be decoration, Evelyn. I'm asking you to help me run this empire. And if people have a problem with that, they can take it up with me. It should have sounded arrogant. Instead, it sounded like a promise. They took separate cars to the office. Adrian in his sedan with Victor, Evelyn in her own modest vehicle that she'd picked up from the garage yesterday. The morning commute gave her time to think about everything that had changed in less than a week. 7 days ago, she'd been invisible, careful, safe. Now she was walking into a building where everyone would soon know she'd been promoted, would eventually know she was sleeping with the boss, would definitely have opinions about both. The elevator ride up felt like marching toward a firing squad. But when the doors opened on the 42nd floor, everything looked exactly the same. People nodded good morning as she passed. Her new office door had her name on it, Evelyn Carter, executive partner. But no one stared or whispered or gave her knowing looks. Either they were very good at pretending or word genuinely hadn't spread yet. She'd barely settled at her desk when Adrian's voice came through the intercom. My office, 5 minutes. Professional, efficient. Nothing in his tone suggested they'd spent the night tangled together. Evelyn grabbed her tablet and headed for his office, forcing herself to walk normally, despite the fact that her body still remembered exactly how his hands had felt on her skin. Adrian was standing by the windows when she entered, talking on the phone in rapid Russian. He gestured for her to sit, then wrapped up the call with what sounded like a threat delivered in a pleasant tone. Problem? Evelyn asked when he hung up. Supplier in Moscow getting creative with his pricing. Adrian sat across from her, not behind his desk, an equal like he'd promised. Nothing I can't handle. How are you this morning, really? The question caught her off guard. I'm good. A little overwhelmed, trying not to think too hard about what we're doing. We're running a company together, and occasionally sleeping together. Doesn't seem that complicated to me. You say that now. Wait until everyone knows. Let them know. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Evelyn, I'm not going to hide you. Not because I'm ashamed. I'm not. But because I refuse to treat what we have like it's something dirty or wrong. When the time is right, when you're established enough that no one can question your position, I'm going to make it very clear to everyone in this building exactly where we stand. And where do we stand? Together. Simple. Direct. Absolutely terrifying in its certainty. Evelyn's phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Lunch today? You've been dodging me all weekend. Problem? Adrian asked, noting her expression. My best friend. She wants to have lunch. And that's a problem because she's going to ask questions I'm not ready to answer. Evelyn looked up at him. What am I supposed to tell her? Sorry I've been distant. I accidentally fell into my boss's lap and now we're sleeping together and he's made me his business partner? Adrian's lips twitched. When you put it like that, it does sound slightly insane. Slightly? Tell her the truth. Or don't. That's your call. He stood, moving to his desk to grab something. But Evelyn, you're going to have to tell people eventually. Your friends, your family, they'll notice you've changed. Better they hear it from you than through the rumor mill. He was right. Of course he was right. But the idea of explaining any of this to Rachel, who'd spent years encouraging Evelyn to date nice, safe men with normal jobs, felt impossible. One crisis at a time, Evelyn muttered. Good philosophy. Adrian handed her a folder. Speaking of crises, we need to deal with the Marcus Chen situation. Evelyn opened the file and felt her stomach sink. Marcus hadn't just stolen from one shipment. The accounting showed systematic theft over 9 months, totaling close to $3 million. He's gone, Adrian said. Left the country Sunday night, Hong Kong, according to my sources. Are you going to bring him back? Probably not worth the effort. Adrian's expression went cold. But I'm going to make sure everyone knows what happens when you steal from me. Marcus just became an object lesson. There it was. The reminder that the man who'd held her so gently last night was also capable of calculated destruction, that his world ran on rules enforced through fear and consequences. What are you going to do? Evelyn asked carefully. Freeze his assets. Make sure every contact he has in the industry knows exactly why. By the time I'm done, Marcus Chen won't be able to get a job washing dishes, let alone working in logistics. Adrian's eyes met hers. Does that bother you? It should. It absolutely should. But Evelyn had spent 6 months watching how Adrian's organization worked, had seen what happened when people mistook his civility for weakness. Marcus had stolen millions and put other people's operations at risk. In Adrian's world, there were consequences for that. No, she said honestly. He knew what he was risking when he decided to steal from you. Something like approval flickered in Adrian's expression. Good. Because this is the reality of what I do, Evelyn. I can't always be gentle. Can't always give people second chances. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. Aren't you? He studied her carefully. Last night was easy, good. But this, he gestured at the folder, this is also who I am. The part that makes hard decisions and doesn't lose sleep over them. Evelyn understood what he was really asking. Could she accept all of him? The tenderness and the ruthlessness? The man who made her coffee in the morning and destroyed people's lives before lunch? I'm still here, she said quietly. Adrian crossed to her, pulling her to her feet and into a kiss that tasted like relief. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. I need you sharp today, he said. We have the Petrov meeting at 2, and they're going to test you. Test me how? They're old-school Russian mafia. They don't like outsiders, they don't trust easily, and they definitely don't respect women in positions of power. His hands framed her face. They're going to push, try to undermine you. See if you're just decoration or if you actually have authority. What do you want me to do? Push back. Show them you're not someone they can dismiss. He kissed her once more, quick and hard. And Evelyn? Don't look to me for approval during the meeting. Make your own calls. I'll back you up, but I need them to see you as a partner, not a subordinate. It was a test, not from the Petrovs, from Adrian himself. He wanted to see if she could hold her own in his world, if the authority he'd given her was something she could actually wield. Okay, Evelyn said. Good. Now get out of my office before I forget we have work to do. She left with her heart pounding and spent the next several hours preparing for the Petrov meeting. Research on their organization, their business interests, their known associates. By the time 2 o'clock rolled around, Evelyn felt as ready as she was going to be. The Petrovs arrived with an entourage. 4 men in expensive suits who looked like they could kill you with their bare hands, and 1 older man who had to be Dmitry Petrov himself. He was in his 60s, barrel-chested, with cold blue eyes that cataloged everything. Adrian greeted them in flawless Russian, then switched to English. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. This is Evelyn Carter, my executive partner. Dmitry's eyes swept over Evelyn with obvious dismissal. Partner, how modern of you, Adrian. The condescension was deliberate. A test, exactly like Adrian had warned. Modern implies a trend, Evelyn said coolly, meeting Dmitry's gaze without flinching. I prefer practical. Adrian needed someone who could handle complex negotiations while maintaining strategic oversight. Gender doesn't enter into capability. One of Dmitry's men smirked. The old man's expression didn't change, but she thought she saw a flicker of something, maybe interest, maybe irritation, in his eyes. Capability, Dmitry repeated. And what capability do you bring to this partnership? The kind that identified the logistical inefficiency in your current port operations and developed a solution that would increase your profit margins by 18%. Evelyn pulled up the analysis she'd prepared on her tablet. Your current route through San Pedro has you paying premium fees for priority processing. If you reroute through Long Beach and utilize the expedited customs framework Adrian's organization has access to, you cut processing time by 36 hours and reduce overhead costs by nearly 20%. Tibeshai's son. She handed the tablet to Dmitry, who studied the numbers with an expression that gave nothing away. His men leaned in, looking at the data over his shoulder. You did this analysis yourself? Dmitry asked. Yes. When? This morning, after Adrian told me about the meeting. She kept her voice level, professional. If you'd like to verify the numbers, I can walk you through the methodology. Dmitri handed the tablet back. For a long moment, he just looked at her, assessing, calculating. Then he turned to Adrian. She's sharp. Where did you find her? She found me, Adrian said, and Evelyn caught the hint of amusement in his voice. Though technically she fell into my lap. Dmitri's eyebrows rose. Story there? Nothing interesting, just fate? Adrian's hand found the small of Evelyn's back, brief, possessive, gone, before anyone could really notice. Shall we discuss the Long Beach proposal? The meeting lasted 2 hours. Dmitri and his men pushed back on every point, questioned every assumption, tested every number. Evelyn held her ground, adjusting figures when they made valid points, defending her analysis when they didn't. Adrian stayed mostly quiet, letting her run the negotiation, only stepping in twice when the discussion veered into territory that required his specific authority. By the time they shook hands on a preliminary agreement, Evelyn was exhausted but exhilarated. Dmitri paused at the door, looking back at her. You have spine, girl. I like that. Then to Adrian, keep this one. She's worth more than the last 3 you had combined. After they left, Adrian closed the office door and pulled Evelyn into his arms. That, he said against her hair, was incredible. You had Dmitri agreeing to terms he would have fought me on for weeks. I just showed him the numbers. You showed him respect without showing weakness. There's a difference. He pulled back to look at her, pride clear in his expression. You're a natural at this, Evelyn. I knew you were smart, but watching you work, that was something else. The validation shouldn't have mattered so much, but it did. He called me girl, Evelyn pointed out. He's 70 and Russian. That's actually a term of affection. Adrian kissed her forehead. Trust me, if he didn't respect you, you'd know. Dmitri doesn't waste politeness on people he doesn't value. Evelyn's phone buzzed. Rachel again. You're avoiding me. What's going on? Adrian saw her expression. Go, have lunch with your friend. You've earned it. It's 4:30. Then have dinner or drinks, whatever women do when they talk about their feelings. He grinned at her expression. I'm kidding, mostly. But seriously, go. You can't hide from your entire life just because things changed. He was right. Again. Annoyingly right. Evelyn texted Rachel. Drinks tonight? I'll explain everything. The response was immediate. Finally. 7 at Rosie's. Don't bail. Rosie's was a wine bar 3 blocks from Evelyn's apartment. Dim lighting, comfortable booths, the kind of place where you could have actual conversations without shouting over music. Rachel was already there when Evelyn arrived, occupying a corner booth with a bottle of red, already breathing on the table. You look different, Rachel said immediately. Evelyn slid into the booth. Different how? I don't know. Glowy. Like you either just had amazing sex or found religion, and you're definitely not the religion type. Rachel poured 2 generous glasses. So who is he? What makes you think it's a he? Because I've known you for 8 years, and you get that specific look on your face when you're into someone. Also, you've been dodging my calls all weekend, which means either someone died or you're sleeping with someone you shouldn't be. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Please tell me it's not that guy from accounting who keeps asking you out. It's not the guy from accounting. Good, because he has weird energy. Rachel took a sip of wine. So who is it? And why are you being all mysterious about it? Evelyn took a long drink, trying to figure out how to explain something she barely understood herself. It's complicated. It's always complicated. That's what makes it interesting. No, I mean, it's actually complicated, like professionally and personally and every other way complicated. Understanding dawned in Rachel's expression. Oh no, please tell me you're not sleeping with your boss. I'm not sleeping with my boss. Oh, thank God. I'm sleeping with my business partner, who also happens to own the company. Rachel choked on her wine. What? So Evelyn told her. Not everything. Not the details about Adrian's less legal business ventures or the dangerous undercurrent of his world. But enough. The promotion. The attraction. The fact that everything had changed in less than a week. Rachel listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, concern, and something that might have been reluctant approval. Okay, she said when Evelyn finished. Okay, let me make sure I understand this. Your boss, partner. Your boss promoted you to partner and you're sleeping with him. The sleeping together happened after the promotion. That makes it better somehow? It makes it not about sex. Evelyn met her friend's eyes. Rachel, I know how this sounds. I know all the reasons this is a terrible idea, but he's not what I expected. He's more. More dangerous, more everything. Evelyn traced the rim of her wine glass. More intelligent, more intense, more honest than anyone I've ever met. He sees me, Rach, not just as an employee or a warm body, but actually sees who I am, and he wants that, wants me. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. You're in love with him. I barely know him. That wasn't a question, Ev. You're in love with him. I can hear it in your voice. Was she? Evelyn didn't know. It was too soon for love, too fast, too intense. But there was something between her and Adrian that felt inevitable, like gravity. Maybe, she admitted, or maybe I'm just falling. There's a difference? I hope so. Rachel reached across the table and took her hand. I'm worried about you. This guy, Adrian, right? He has a lot of power over you. Your job, your career, your heart, apparently. That's a dangerous combination. I know. But you're doing it anyway. I'm doing it anyway, Rachel sighed. Then I'm here. When it goes amazing or when it blows up in your face, I'm here. But Evelyn, be careful. Men with that much power don't always know how to handle it responsibly. It was a fair warning. A good warning. And Evelyn appreciated it even as she knew she wasn't going to heed it. She'd already jumped. Now she was just waiting to see where she'd land. They finished the bottle and ordered another, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. Rachel's nightmare boss, her latest dating disaster, the new restaurant that had opened downtown. Normal things, easy things. But when Evelyn left 3 hours later, slightly buzzed and definitely lighter, her phone showed a text from Adrian. How'd it go? She thinks I'm insane, are you? Evelyn considered this question. A week ago, she would have said no. Would have insisted she was the most rational, careful person she knew. Now? Probably. You? His response came immediately. Definitely. Come over? She should go home. Should maintain some boundaries, some separation between her personal and professional life. Should not spend every night in Adrian Volkov's bed just because that's where she wanted to be. She hailed a cab to his building instead. Adrian met her at the elevator, still in his work clothes, but with his tie gone and his shirt partially unbuttoned. He pulled her into a kiss before the doors fully closed, and Evelyn melted into it with the ease of someone who'd already decided to stop fighting. How was Rachel? He asked when they came up for air. Concerned, protective, convinced I'm making a huge mistake. Are you? Evelyn looked at him, at the intelligence in his eyes, the careful way he was holding her like she might break, the vulnerability he was trying to hide behind casual confidence. Ask me in 6 months, she said. He smiled and pulled her into the penthouse, and they spent the rest of the night proving Rachel both right and wrong. 6 months turned out to be optimistic. 3 weeks after that first night together, Evelyn stood in Adrian's office at 11 p.m., staring at photographs that made her stomach turn. A warehouse fire, 3 bodies, and a connection to one of their shipping operations that was tenuous but present enough to attract federal attention. Tell me you had nothing to do with this, she said quietly. Adrian didn't look up from the reports scattered across his desk. I didn't, but someone did. Someone connected to you. Yes. He finally met her eyes, his expression unreadable. Viktor Kozlov. He's been laundering money through our freight company without authorization. When his partners figured it out, they decided to send a message. 3 people are dead, Adrian. I'm aware. His voice was flat, controlled. I'm also aware that the FBI is now looking at every shipment we've processed in the last 6 months, which means we need to move fast. Evelyn felt something cold settle in her chest. Move fast. How? We cut ties with Viktor, publicly. Make it very clear he was operating independently. Adrian stood, moving to the windows. I've already got my lawyers preparing a statement. By morning, Viktor Kozlov will be persona non grata in every operation I control. That's it? You just disavow him? What do you want me to do, Evelyn? Turn myself in for crimes I didn't commit? Viktor made his choices. He knew the risks. People died. People die every day in this business. He turned to face her, and there was something hard in his expression now, something that reminded her exactly who she was dealing with. I didn't kill them. Victor's partners did. But if I don't handle this correctly, the FBI is going to use those deaths to dismantle everything I've built. So yes, I'm going to protect what's mine. It was the first real fight they'd had, not about jealousy or misunderstandings or the normal relationship friction, about the fundamental reality of Adrian's world and whether Evelyn could actually stomach it. I need air, she said. Evelyn, just give me a minute, please. She walked out of his office, past the empty cubicles and dark conference rooms, to the small balcony that overlooked the city. The night air was cold, and she'd left her jacket inside, but she welcomed the discomfort. It gave her something to focus on besides the churning in her gut. 3 people, dead because of money and territory and the kind of violence that existed just under the surface of Adrian's carefully maintained empire. She'd known intellectually that his business had dark corners, had chosen to ignore them because the rest of it, the legitimate operations, the brilliant strategy, the way he treated her like an equal, had been easier to focus on. But this was real. Bodies and federal investigations and the kind of consequences that didn't stay neatly contained in boardrooms. The door behind her opened. Adrian's jacket settled around her shoulders, still warm from his body. I can't make this easier, he said quietly, standing beside her at the railing. Can't pretend my world is safe or clean or anything other than what it is. I know. Victor will disappear. Probably to Eastern Europe, maybe further. The families of the people who died will receive anonymous payments that won't bring their loved ones back, but might help with funeral costs. His hands gripped the railing. And I'll spend the next month making sure the FBI finds exactly nothing connecting me to any of it. Because you're good at hiding things. Because I'm good at protecting what matters. He looked at her. This is the reality, Evelyn. I deal with dangerous people who sometimes do terrible things. I can't control all of them. The best I can do is damage control. And if the FBI doesn't buy it, if they find something, then I have very expensive lawyers and a lot of documentation showing Victor was a rogue operator. Adrian's voice was matter-of-fact. It won't be pleasant, but I'll survive. I always do. Evelyn turned to face him fully. Is this what it's always going to be like? Violence and investigations and wondering if today's the day everything falls apart? Sometimes. Not always. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Most days are boring. Meetings and contracts and arguing about profit margins. But yes, sometimes it's this. Sometimes people die and I have to make hard choices about who to protect and who to sacrifice. And that doesn't keep you up at night. It used to. His hand cupped her face. Now I just accept it as the cost of doing business, which probably makes me a terrible person. It makes you a survivor. Something shifted in his expression. Is that what you tell yourself? That you're with a survivor and not a criminal? The question stung because it hit close to truth she'd been avoiding. I tell myself I'm with someone who's honest about who he is. Someone who gave me a choice and keeps giving me choices. And tonight? What choice are you making tonight? Evelyn looked out at the city, all those lights representing people living normal lives with normal problems. She could go back to that. Could walk away from Adrian and his dangerous world and find someone safe who worked a safe job and never had to worry about FBI investigations or warehouse fires. The thought made her feel hollow. I'm choosing to stay, she said. I'm choosing to trust that you'll keep me out of the worst of it. And I'm choosing to believe you when you say you didn't know what Victor was doing. Adrian pulled her into his arms, and she felt the tension leave his body. I didn't. I swear to you, Evelyn. I run a lot of operations in gray areas, but I don't deal in the kind of violence that kills innocent people. Okay. Okay? He pulled back to look at her. That's it? What do you want me to say? That I'm happy about this? I'm not. I'm scared and angry and questioning every decision that led me here. She met his eyes. But I also know you. Know that if you say you didn't know, you didn't know. So I'm choosing to believe you and deal with everything else as it comes. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. They went back inside and spent the next 3 hours going through every document related to Victor's operations, making sure there was nothing that could blow back on Adrian's core business. It was tedious, careful work, and by the time they finished, the sun was starting to rise over the city. "Go home," Adrian said, rubbing his eyes. "Get some sleep. I'll handle the lawyers and the FBI and all of it." "I'm staying." "Evelyn, I'm your partner, remember? That means I don't bail when things get hard." She squeezed his hand. "We handle this together." The FBI came that afternoon. 2 agents in dark suits who asked polite questions with sharp eyes, taking notes while Adrian's lawyers hovered like protective sharks. Evelyn sat through the entire interview, saying little but absorbing everything, watching how Adrian navigated the interrogation with the same calm he used in business negotiations. By the time the agents left, they had a file full of documentation showing Victor as an independent contractor who'd violated the terms of his agreement. Nothing concrete connecting Adrian to the warehouse fire. Nothing actionable. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like dodging a bullet that might still be coming. "That went better than expected," Adrian's lead attorney said, packing up his briefcase. "They're fishing. Don't have anything solid. Keep monitoring it," Adrian said. "I want to know if they start sniffing around any of our other operations." After the lawyers left, Adrian and Evelyn sat in his office in exhausted silence. "Thank you," he said finally, "for staying, for backing me up in there." "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I didn't know." He looked at her seriously. "This morning when you asked if I had anything to do with it, I saw the doubt in your eyes. Saw you wondering if you'd gotten involved with someone worse than you thought." "I was wondering. Won't lie about that." Evelyn moved to stand in front of him. "But then I remembered every conversation we've had, every time you've been honest with me about your business, every line you've told me you won't cross." She took his hands. "You're not a saint, Adrian, but you're not a monster either. You're just a man trying to survive in a world that doesn't forgive mistakes. And you're okay with that?" "I'm learning to be." He pulled her down into his lap, a deliberate echo of how this had all started, and kissed her slowly, thoroughly. "Move in with me," he said against her mouth. Evelyn pulled back. "What?" "Move in with me. You're already spending most nights at my place anyway. Your apartment is too far from the office, and He stopped, something vulnerable crossing his face. "I want you there. Want to wake up next to you every morning. Want to come home to you every night." "Adrian, that's fast." "I know. Too fast, probably." His hands framed her face. "But I've spent most of my adult life alone, Evelyn. By choice. Because it was easier and safer, and I didn't have to worry about anyone else. Then you fell into my lap and everything changed. Now I can't imagine going back to that empty penthouse without you in it." Her heart was doing complicated things in her chest. "We've only been together 3 weeks. I know. People will definitely talk if I move in with you. Let them. My lease isn't up for 4 months. I'll buy out the lease." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. "Say yes, Evelyn. Take the risk. Choose me again." She should say no. Should insist they slow down, establish better boundaries, wait until they'd been together longer than most people's trial gym memberships. "Yes," she said instead. Adrian's smile was bright enough to light the city. "Yeah? Yeah, but I'm keeping my apartment until the lease is up, just in case." "Just in case what?" "Just in case you turn out to be a terrible roommate who leaves wet towels on the floor and doesn't replace the toilet paper." He laughed, pulling her closer. "I have people who handle the toilet paper." "Of course you do." They sealed the agreement with a kiss that turned into more, right there in his office with the city spread out below them. And when Evelyn finally left for the night, alone, because Adrian had another meeting with his lawyers, she felt like she was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and absolutely right. Moving in took less than a week. Evelyn didn't have much. Her apartment had been temporary housing that never quite became permanent. And Adrian had movers pack everything while she was at work. By Friday, her clothes were in his closet, her books were on his shelves, and her toothbrush was in the holder next to his. "This is surreal," she said, standing in the middle of what was now their bedroom. Adrian wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Good surreal or bad surreal?" "I don't know yet. Ask me when the novelty wears off." "What if it doesn't? Then I guess we're stuck with each other." His arms tightened. I can live with that. That weekend, they stayed in. Adrian cooked, badly, as he'd warned, but with enough enthusiasm that Evelyn found it endearing. They watched movies and argued about plot holes and fell asleep tangled together on the couch like normal people in a normal relationship. Except nothing about them was normal, and Evelyn knew it. Monday brought new complications. The office grapevine had finally caught up to reality, and when Evelyn walked in, she could feel the weight of knowing glances. People were talking, not openly, not where she could hear, but the whispers followed her like shadows. Ignore them, Adrian said when she mentioned it. They'll find something else to gossip about soon enough. But they didn't. If anything, the attention intensified. Evelyn caught speculative looks in meetings, heard conversations cut off when she entered rooms. One of the junior associates made a snide comment about sleeping your way to the top that made it back to her through Rachel. She was in Adrian's office discussing a contract negotiation when James Reeves knocked on the door. Sorry to interrupt, James said, though his expression suggested he wasn't sorry at all. But I need to discuss the Nakamura deal, unless Ms. Carter here is handling that too? The emphasis on her name was deliberate, dismissive. Adrian's expression went cold. Ms. Carter is handling all major negotiations going forward, which means yes, she's handling Nakamura. Is there a problem with that, James? No problem. Just wondering about her qualifications for a deal that complex. James smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. No offense, Evelyn, but 3 weeks ago you were taking notes in meetings. Now you're running them. It's a lot of responsibility for someone so new. The implication was clear. She hadn't earned this. She was only here because she was sleeping with the boss. Evelyn felt Adrian tense beside her, but she put a hand on his arm before he could respond. You're right, James, she said calmly. 3 weeks ago I was taking notes, which means I have detailed records of every deal this company has closed in the last 6 months, including the mistakes that cost us the Yamamoto contract. She pulled up a file on her tablet and turned it toward him. Would you like me to walk you through those mistakes? Because I have notes. Very thorough notes, including the part where you assured Adrian the payment terms were standard when they absolutely weren't. James's face went red. That was a minor oversight. That cost us $2 million and a key partnership in Tokyo. Evelyn's voice remained pleasant, professional. So yes, I'm new to this position, but I've been paying attention, and I don't make the same mistakes twice. Can you say the same? The silence that followed was absolute. James looked at Adrian, clearly expecting backup, but Adrian's expression was absolutely neutral. I think we're done here, James, Adrian said quietly. Unless you have actual concerns about the Nakamura deal? James left without another word. After the door closed, Adrian turned to Evelyn with something like awe in his expression. That was brilliant. That was mean. That was necessary. He pulled her close. James has been questioning your authority since I promoted you. He needed to understand that you're not someone he can undermine. By humiliating him in front of you? By showing him you have teeth. Adrian kissed her temple. He'll spread the word. By tomorrow, everyone will know that attacking you has consequences. It's not pleasant, but it's how you establish power in this world. Evelyn knew he was right, but it still felt wrong, like she was becoming someone she didn't recognize, someone harder, sharper, more willing to hurt people to protect her position. Is this what it takes? She asked quietly. To survive in your world? Becoming someone who crushes people before they can crush you? Sometimes. Not always. Adrian turned her to face him. But Evelyn, what you did to James wasn't cruelty. It was self-defense. He was trying to undermine you, to make everyone question your authority. You shut it down with facts and competence. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't feel like nothing. Because you're a good person who doesn't like hurting people, but being good doesn't mean being a doormat. His hands framed her face. You can be kind and still have boundaries, can be compassionate and still defend yourself. The two aren't mutually exclusive. She wanted to believe him, wanted to think she could navigate this world without losing the parts of herself she valued. But every day brought new tests, new ways she had to prove herself, new situations where kindness felt like weakness. That night, lying in bed with Adrian asleep beside her, Evelyn stared at the ceiling and wondered who she was becoming. Wondered if the woman who'd fallen into Adrian's lap 2 months ago would recognize the person she was now. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Rachel. How are you holding up? Heard about the James thing. Evelyn typed back, fine, tired. Not sure if I'm winning or losing. Both, probably. That's how you know you're doing it right. It was meant to be encouraging, but it just made Evelyn feel more lost. What did winning even look like? Successfully defending her position? Earning respect through fear? Becoming the kind of person who could destroy someone's credibility without hesitation? Adrian stirred beside her, his arm pulling her closer in his sleep. She felt the warmth of him, the steady presence, and tried to anchor herself in that. Whatever else was changing, this was real. He was real. The way he looked at her like she was something precious, the way he trusted her with parts of himself he showed no one else, the way he made her feel seen and valued and whole. That had to count for something. The Nakamura deal closed 2 weeks later with terms so favorable that even Dmitry Petrov sent a congratulatory bottle of vodka. Evelyn had spent 70 hours over 10 days negotiating every clause, every contingency, every possible point of failure. When the contracts were finally signed, she felt like she'd earned something real. Adrian took her to dinner to celebrate. Not one of the fancy restaurants they usually went to, but a small Italian place in Little Italy where the owner greeted him by name and the wine came in mason jars. I didn't know you came to places like this, Evelyn said, looking around at the checkered tablecloths and old family photos on the walls. I don't. Not usually. Adrian poured them both wine. But my mother used to bring me here when I was a kid, before she got sick, before everything got complicated. This was where we came for celebrations. Evelyn reached across the table and took his hand. Thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for giving me a reason to celebrate. His thumb traced circles on her palm. The Nakamura deal. Evelyn, that was all you. Your strategy, your negotiation, your instinct for what they needed to hear. I couldn't have done it better myself. You could have. Maybe. But I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much as watching you do it. He raised his glass. To my brilliant partner, who proves every day that falling into my lap was the best accident either of us ever had. They clinked glasses, and Evelyn felt some of the tension she'd been carrying for weeks finally ease. Maybe she was changing. Maybe this world was making her harder, sharper, more calculating. But she was also succeeding, actually earning the position Adrian had given her, proving to herself and everyone else that she belonged. The food arrived, homemade pasta and bread that tasted like comfort, and they ate and talked about everything except work. About the trip to Italy Adrian wanted to take, about Evelyn's childhood in Oregon, about the piano music he'd been composing that he was too self-conscious to play for anyone. Play for me, Evelyn said. It's not good. I don't care. I want to hear it. So when they got home, Adrian sat at the piano in his living room and played. He was right. It wasn't technically perfect, his fingers stumbling occasionally over complex passages. But it was beautiful in the way unfinished things sometimes are, raw and honest and entirely his. When he finished, Evelyn was crying. That bad? He asked, turning on the bench. That good. She wiped her eyes. You never show anyone this, do you? This part of yourself? No one's ever asked before. She crossed to him and kissed him, tasting salt from her own tears. I'm asking. I want all of it, Adrian. The business genius and the ruthless negotiator and the man who plays piano in his living room and misses his mother. He pulled her into his lap, their position, the one that had started everything, and held her like she was something breakable and precious. I love you, he said quietly. I know it's fast. No, I probably shouldn't say it yet. But I do. I love you, Evelyn Carter. Love how smart you are, how brave, how you call me on my bullshit and stay anyway. Love that you see all of me and somehow haven't run. Evelyn's heart felt too big for her chest. She should probably wait, should make him work for it, should protect herself from the vulnerability of saying it back. I love you too, she said instead. Even though you're terrible at cooking and have questionable taste in vodka and run a semi-legal empire that gives me anxiety. He laughed, and it sounded like relief. Semi-legal, I like that. Don't push it. They made love there on the piano bench, clumsy and desperate and absolutely perfect. And afterwards, lying on the floor because they'd never quite made it to the bedroom, Evelyn felt like she'd finally found the answer to Rachel's question. She wasn't winning or losing, she was just living, fully and fearlessly and with someone who loved her exactly as she was. That had to be enough. It stopped being enough 3 months later when someone tried to kill Adrian. They were leaving a restaurant in the financial district, one of the legitimate ones where Adrian met with investors who didn't ask too many questions about where his money came from. Evelyn had just made a joke about the sommelier's pretentious wine descriptions when Victor stepped forward from his position by the car, his hand going to his jacket. "Get down," he said, his voice sharp. Adrian's arm was already around Evelyn, pulling her behind him, pushing her toward the restaurant entrance. She heard the crack of gunfire, felt Adrian stumble, saw Victor return fire toward a black sedan that was already peeling away from the curb. Then everything was sirens and shouting and the coppery smell of blood. Adrian's blood. "I'm fine," he said, even as red spread across his shoulder. "Evelyn, I'm fine." He wasn't fine. The bullet had gone through his shoulder, missing anything vital but leaving a wound that bled profusely and turned his shirt dark. Victor was already on the phone, calling people who weren't police, giving orders in clipped Russian while keeping his weapon trained on the street. Evelyn's hands shook as she pressed her jacket against Adrian's shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. "We need an ambulance. No hospitals." Adrian's face had gone pale, but his voice was steady. "Victor, get the car." "Adrian, you've been shot. And if we go to a hospital, there will be questions I can't answer, and federal agents I can't avoid." He gripped her hand with his uninjured arm. "I have a doctor, someone discreet. Victor will take us there." The ride to wherever they were going passed in a blur. Evelyn sat in the back seat with Adrian's head in her lap, maintaining pressure on the wound while he gritted his teeth and tried to pretend he wasn't in agony. Victor drove like the former military operative he was, taking side streets and making random turns that suggested he was checking for tails. The doctor turned out to be a clinic in a part of town Evelyn had never been to, run by a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who took one look at Adrian and gestured them into a back room without asking any questions. "Gunshot wound through and through," she said, examining Adrian's shoulder with practiced efficiency. "You're lucky. Another 2 inches to the right, and you'd be drowning in your own blood right now." "Always was lucky," Adrian managed, then winced as Dr. Chen began cleaning the wound. "I'll need to stitch this. It's going to hurt." Dr. Chen looked at Evelyn. "You might want to wait outside." "I'm staying," Evelyn said. She held Adrian's hand while Dr. Chen worked, watching him breathe through the pain, seeing the control it took for him not to scream. When it was finally over, wound cleaned, stitched, bandaged, Adrian looked like he'd been through a war. "You need rest," Dr. Chen said, "and antibiotics, and probably a vacation from whatever lifestyle led to you getting shot in the first place." "I'll consider it," Adrian said dryly. They paid in cash. Victor drove them home, and it wasn't until they were safely in the penthouse with Adrian settled on the couch that Evelyn allowed herself to fall apart. "Hey!" Adrian reached for her with his good arm. "I'm okay. It looks worse than it is." "Someone shot you." Her voice cracked. "Someone shot at you, at us, and they could have killed you. But they didn't. This time." She pulled away, pacing across the living room. "What about next time? What about the time after that? How many times can you get lucky, Adrian?" He was quiet for a moment, watching her. "This is what I tried to tell you, what I warned you about. My world is dangerous. People have tried to kill me before. They'll probably try again. And you just accept that? That someone might succeed eventually?" "What choice do I have?" His voice was tired. "I've made enemies, Evelyn. People who want me dead for a dozen different reasons. I can't undo that. Can't make myself safe by wishing for it." Evelyn stopped pacing and looked at him, at the blood-stained bandage visible through his torn shirt, at the exhaustion in his eyes, at the reality of what loving him actually meant. Not romantic danger, not the thrill of living on the edge, actual violence that left actual wounds and could actually kill him. "Who did this?" she asked quietly. "I don't know yet, but I will." Something hard entered his expression. "And when I find out, I'll make sure they understand what happens when you come after what's mine." There it was again. The ruthlessness that lurked under his charm. The willingness to do terrible things to protect himself and the people he loved. "I'm scared," Evelyn admitted. "Good. You should be." He held out his hand, and after a moment she took it, letting him pull her down beside him on the couch. "But being scared doesn't mean you have to leave. It just means you understand the stakes." "What if understanding the stakes isn't enough?" Adrian's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. Then you make a choice. Stay and accept the risks, or go and find someone safer. Either way, I won't blame you. Won't you? I'll be devastated. But I won't blame you. His eyes held hers. I love you, Evelyn. Enough to want you safe, even if that means safe from me. She kissed him then, tasting salt and fear and the absolute certainty that she couldn't leave even if she wanted to. He was in her blood now, in her bones, woven into the fabric of who she'd become. Leaving him would be like cutting off a limb. I'm staying, she whispered against his mouth. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. They fell asleep on the couch. Evelyn curled carefully against Adrian's uninjured side, both of them too wired to move to the bedroom. Somewhere in the city, people were looking for whoever had shot at them. Victor had called in favors, activated contacts, set in motion the machinery that would eventually identify the shooter. By morning, they had answers. Marcus Chen, Victor said, standing in the living room with his phone in hand. Or rather, someone Marcus hired. The shooter's a professional out of Miami, already left the country. Adrian, who'd refused painkillers because they made him foggy, looked unsurprised. Marcus finally grew a spine. Apparently losing everything you own will do that, Victor said. My sources say he's been planning this for months, waiting for the right opportunity. And he chose a public restaurant? Evelyn asked. That seems sloppy. It was supposed to look random. Gang violence in the financial district, wrong place, wrong time. Victor's expression was grim. If the shot had been 2 inches to the right like Dr. Chen said, it would have worked. Adrian stood slowly, favoring his injured shoulder. Find Marcus. I don't care where he's hiding or who's protecting him. Find him. Already on it. Victor left, and Evelyn was alone with Adrian and the cold reality of what came next. What are you going to do when Victor finds him? She asked. What do you think I'm going to do? I'm asking you to tell me, directly. No euphemisms. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. I'm going to make an example of him. Make sure everyone knows what happens when you try to kill me. Marcus will wish the bullet had found me instead. Evelyn's stomach turned. You're going to kill him. I'm going to make sure he's no longer a threat. How that happens depends on how much fight he has left. Adrian's voice was flat, emotionless. Does that bother you? Of course it bothers me. But not enough to leave. It wasn't a question. Evelyn realized with sick certainty that he was right. She was bothered, disturbed, horrified by the casual way he discussed ending someone's life. But she also understood it. Marcus had tried to kill Adrian, had hired a professional to put a bullet in him. In Adrian's world, there were consequences for that. I don't want to know the details, she said finally. When you find him, when you do whatever you're going to do, I don't want to know. Okay, but Adrian? She met his eyes. Don't become a monster just to prove a point. Whatever you do to Marcus, make sure you can still live with yourself after. Something softened in his expression. That's the difference between you and me, Evelyn. I already know I can live with it. The question is whether you can live with me after. She didn't have an answer for that. The office felt different after the shooting. People looked at Evelyn with something new in their eyes. Not just speculation about her relationship with Adrian, but a kind of wary respect. She'd been there when someone tried to kill the boss, had held his hand while he got stitched up, was still showing up to work like nothing had changed. James Reeves actually apologized for his earlier behavior, though Evelyn suspected the apology had less to do with genuine remorse and more to do with not wanting to anger the woman who'd proven she wouldn't flinch when bullets started flying. You don't have to accept it, Adrian said when she mentioned the apology. He was working from home, doctor's orders, with his arm in a sling that he kept trying to remove. I know, but maybe it's progress. Evelyn sat on the edge of his desk. People are starting to see me as more than just your girlfriend. You were never just my girlfriend. Tell that to everyone who's been whispering about us for 3 months. Adrian's good hand found her waist. Let them whisper. You've proven yourself a dozen times over. Anyone with eyes can see you belong in that office. Even shot up and on painkillers you refuse to take, you're still annoyingly confident. One of my most charming qualities. He pulled her closer. How was the Patterson meeting? Tense. They wanted to renegotiate terms after hearing about the shooting, Implied that our organization might be too unstable for a long-term partnership. What did you tell them? Evelyn smiled. I told them that instability was temporary, but our profit margins were forever. Then I showed them the numbers from the last quarter and suggested they'd be fools to walk away from a 23% return on investment over concerns about an isolated incident. And they signed, though they did negotiate an additional security clause that costs us an extra 2%. Worth it. Adrian kissed her palm. You're getting better at this. Reading people, knowing when to push and when to give ground. I have a good teacher. You have natural talent. I just pointed you in the right direction. His expression grew serious. Evelyn, I need to tell you something about Marcus. Her stomach clenched. I said I didn't want to know. This isn't about what I'm going to do, it's about what he did. Adrian hesitated, which was unlike him. The shooting wasn't just about revenge. He was hired. Hired by who? That's what I'm trying to figure out. But someone paid Marcus a substantial amount of money to take me out, which means this isn't over. The fear that had been living in Evelyn's chest since the shooting crystallized into something sharp and immediate. Someone wants you dead badly enough to pay for it. Several someones, probably. I've made a lot of enemies. Adrian's hand tightened on her waist. Victor is increasing security. You'll have a detail following you whenever you're not with me. Adrian, this isn't negotiable. Someone tried to kill me, and they might try again. If they think hurting you would hurt me, and they absolutely do, then you're a target too. The weight of that settled over her. She wasn't just Adrian's partner in business and love. She was a vulnerability, a weakness that could be exploited. This is my fault, Adrian said quietly. I should have kept more distance. Should have protected you better. Stop. Evelyn turned to face him fully. You gave me choices, remember? I chose this. Chose you. Chose to be visible instead of invisible. You don't get to take that away now because someone decided to be violent. Someone will always decide to be violent. That's the nature of my business. Then we'll deal with it. Together. She kissed him gently, careful of his injured shoulder. I'm not running, Adrian. Not from the danger, not from you, not from any of this. You should. Probably. But I'm stubborn. I've noticed. He pulled her into his lap with his good arm, and they sat there in the afternoon light, holding each other like the world outside couldn't touch them. But it could. And it did. The second attempt came a week later. Evelyn was leaving the office late, her new security detail, two former Marines named Thompson and Rodriguez flanking her as she walked to the parking garage. She'd gotten used to their presence, the way they checked corners and maintained sight lines and generally treated every public space like a potential threat zone. She was halfway to her car when Thompson's hand shot out, stopping her. Ma'am, stay back. He was looking at her car, specifically at something underneath it. Rodriguez was already on his phone, speaking in rapid-fire commands. Thompson guided Evelyn back toward the building entrance, his body between her and the vehicle. What's wrong? Evelyn asked, though part of her already knew. Possible IED under your vehicle. We're evacuating the garage and calling the bomb squad. The next hour passed in a surreal haze. Police, fire department, a bomb disposal robot that looked like something from a science fiction movie. And finally, confirmation that yes, there had been an explosive device attached to Evelyn's car, sophisticated enough that it would have detonated when she started the engine. Adrian arrived while they were still clearing the scene, Victor at his side, his face a mask of cold fury despite the sling still immobilizing his shoulder. Are you hurt? He gripped Evelyn's arms, his eyes scanning her for injuries. I'm fine. Thompson spotted it before I got close. Adrian looked at Thompson with something like gratitude. Thank you. Just doing my job, sir. The police wanted statements. The federal agents who'd been watching Adrian's organization wanted statements. Everyone wanted to know if Evelyn had enemies, if she'd noticed anyone following her, if there was any reason someone would want her dead specifically. She's with me, Adrian said flatly. That's reason enough for some people. They went back to the penthouse under heavy security, the building's lobby suddenly full of armed men who worked for Adrian. Evelyn felt numb, disconnected, like she was watching this happen to someone else. I want you to leave the city, Adrian said once they were alone. Just for a few weeks until I can neutralize whoever's doing this. No. Evelyn. No. She turned to face him. I know what you're thinking, that keeping me close puts me in danger. that sending me away keeps me safe. But Adrian, they already tried to kill me. Running won't change that. It might buy time. For what? For you to handle this alone? To shut me out and make decisions about my safety without me? She stepped closer. We're past that. We're partners, remember? That means we face this together. I can't protect you if you won't let me. Then stop trying to protect me and start trusting me. Evelyn's voice shook slightly. I'm scared, terrified actually. Someone tried to blow me up today, but I'm not going to let fear make me run from the life we've built. Adrian pulled her into his arms, careful of his still healing shoulder. I can't lose you. Then don't push me away. They stood there holding each other while outside, Adrian's people began the systematic process of hunting down whoever had placed the bomb. Victor coordinated with contacts across 3 states. Money changed hands. Information flowed. And slowly, piece by piece, a picture emerged. The person who wanted Adrian dead wasn't Marcus Chen. Marcus had just been a convenient tool, a disgraced former employee with motive and connections. The real threat was someone Adrian had crossed years ago, someone with patience and resources and a long memory. Sergei Volkov, Adrian's uncle. I don't understand, Evelyn said when Adrian explained it. He's your family. He's my father's brother, and he's been trying to take control of the organization since my father died. Adrian's voice was flat. I've blocked him at every turn. Built my own empire instead of joining his. Made it clear I had no interest in his version of the family business. So he's trying to kill you? He's trying to eliminate competition. The fact that we share DNA is irrelevant to him. Adrian poured himself a drink with his good hand, then thought better of it and set the glass down. I should have seen this coming. Should have known Sergei wouldn't stay quiet forever. What are we going to do? We? Adrian looked at her. There is no we in this, Evelyn. This is between me and Sergei, family business in the worst possible way. He tried to kill me too, because you're with me. Because hurting you hurts me. Adrian's hands gripped the counter, which is exactly why you need to step back from this. No. Evelyn, I said no. She moved to stand in front of him. You don't get to shut me out now, not after everything. Either we're partners or we're not, Adrian. You don't get to decide I'm a partner only when it's convenient. His jaw tightened. This isn't about convenience, it's about keeping you alive. And what about keeping you alive? If I leave, if I step back, does that make you safer? Or does it just mean you're facing Sergei alone? I've faced worse alone. But you don't have to anymore. Evelyn's voice softened. That's what you told me, remember? That you were tired of being alone. That you wanted me there. Well, I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere just because things got dangerous. Adrian pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. I love you, which means the thought of anything happening to you makes me physically ill. I love you too, which means I'm staying. They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other while the city lights glittered below them, and somewhere out there, Sergei Volkov planned his next move. The next week was a masterclass in strategic warfare. Adrian moved pieces on a chessboard Evelyn couldn't entirely see, making calls and holding meetings and setting things in motion that he wouldn't fully explain. She trusted him, had to trust him, but the not knowing was corrosive. I'm freezing his assets, Adrian explained one night over dinner neither of them was eating. Calling in favors from people who owe me, making it very clear that anyone who sides with Sergei is making an enemy of me. Will it work? It'll slow him down, buy us time to make a more permanent solution. Evelyn didn't ask what permanent solution meant. She was learning there were some things she was better off not knowing. But then Victor came to them with news that changed everything. Sergei's daughter, he said without preamble. Anastasia. She's reached out, wants to meet. Adrian's expression went carefully neutral. With me? With both of you. Victor looked at Evelyn. She specifically asked for Ms. Carter to be there. That's a trap, Adrian said immediately. Maybe. Maybe not. Victor shrugged. She claims she wants to broker peace. Says her father has gone too far and she wants to stop this before anyone else gets hurt. And you believe her? I believe she's scared. Sergei's been escalating. First the shooting, then the bomb. If he keeps going, eventually he'll draw attention we can't deflect. Federal attention. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Set up the meeting, somewhere public. And Victor, bring everyone. The meeting was set for a restaurant in Midtown, the kind of place where politicians had lunch and celebrities tried to avoid paparazzi. Neutral ground that was too visible for violence. Anastasia Volkov was not what Evelyn expected. She was young, maybe 25, with her father's ice blue eyes but a softer face. She sat alone at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup like she was trying to draw warmth from it. Uncle Adrian. She stood when they approached, and Evelyn saw her hands were shaking. Thank you for meeting me. Anastasia. Adrian's voice was neutral. You said you wanted to talk about your father. I want to stop him. She looked at Evelyn. You must be Evelyn Carter. I'm sorry about the car. About all of it. My father he's not thinking clearly. He tried to kill both of us, Evelyn said. I know. Anastasia sat back down heavily. And he won't stop. Not unless someone stops him. What are you proposing? Adrian asked. I'll testify against him. Give you everything you need to shut down his operations, freeze his accounts, make him irrelevant. Anastasia's eyes were desperate. But I need protection. He'll kill me if he finds out I betrayed him. Why? Evelyn asked. Why turn on your own father? Because he's a monster. Anastasia's voice cracked. And because someone has to stop this. Uncle Adrian, you've built something legitimate, something that doesn't require bodies in its foundation. My father can't stand that. Can't accept that you succeeded where he failed. Adrian studied his niece for a long moment. What do you want in return? Safety. A new life somewhere he can't reach me. And she hesitated. I want your word that you won't become like him, that winning this fight won't turn you into the thing you're fighting against. Evelyn felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Here was someone else asking Adrian to stay human, to not let vengeance consume him. You have my word, Adrian said quietly. They spent the next 2 hours going over details. Anastasia had documents, recordings, evidence of criminal activity that would put Sergei away for decades. She turned it all over with hands that never stopped shaking. He was a good father once, she said as they were leaving, before the power corrupted him, before he decided family was just another asset to exploit. She looked at Evelyn. Don't let that happen to you too. Don't let this world make you forget why you fell in love. It was advice Evelyn hadn't known she needed. With Anastasia's evidence, Adrian moved quickly. Within 48 hours, federal agents raided Sergei's operations across 3 states. Assets were frozen, associates were arrested, and Sergei himself was taken into custody on charges that would keep him locked up for the rest of his life. It was over. Except it wasn't. Not really. I destroyed my uncle, Adrian said that night, standing by the windows of the penthouse. Used his own daughter against him. That's not something I'll forget. Evelyn moved to stand beside him. He tried to kill you. Kill us. You defended yourself. Did I? Or did I just prove Anastasia right? That this world turns everyone into monsters eventually? You're not a monster. How do you know? He looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. How do you know I won't wake up one day and realize I've become exactly like him, willing to destroy anyone who threatens what's mine? Evelyn took his face in her hands. Because I know you. Know that you question yourself, that you set limits, that you asked Anastasia to remind you to stay human. Monsters don't do that. Maybe they do. Maybe that's how they sleep at night. Adrian. She made him look at her. You are not your uncle. You made hard choices, yes, but you did it to protect yourself and the people you love. That's not the same as what Sergei did. He pulled her close, and she felt the tension in his body. I love you, more than I thought I could love anyone, and that terrifies me. Why? Because loving you gives me something to lose, something worth protecting at any cost. And I don't know where the line is between protecting you and becoming the monster. Evelyn understood then. This was the real danger. Not the bullets or the bombs, but the slow erosion of the man she loved into something harder, colder, more ruthless. The risk that fighting to protect what they had would destroy it from the inside. We'll figure it out, she said. Together. And if I ever see you crossing that line, I'll tell you. Promise? I promise. They stood there holding each other while the city lights flickered below, and Evelyn felt the weight of everything that had happened settle into something she could carry. This was her life now, the danger and the love and the constant balancing act between safety and surrender. She wouldn't have chosen it 6 months ago. But standing here with Adrian's arms around her, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, she couldn't imagine choosing anything else. The aftermath of Sergei's arrest was quieter than Evelyn expected. No dramatic confrontations, no final showdowns, just the slow unwinding of tension as Adrian's organization absorbed the vacuum left by his uncle's downfall. Business continued. Contracts were signed. The city kept turning like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Adrian was different after Sergei. Not broken, exactly, but marked. He worked longer hours, questioned decisions more, second-guessed himself in ways he never had before. Evelyn watched him carry the weight of what he'd done, using Anastasia against her own father, destroying family to survive, and knew that some scars didn't show on the surface. "Talk to me," she said one night, finding him at the piano at 3 a.m. He wasn't playing, just sitting there with his hands on the keys. "Can't sleep." "I noticed." She sat beside him on the bench. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "I keep thinking about what Anastasia said, about not becoming the monster, and I wonder if I already have." "You haven't." "How do you know?" "Because you love me." "Love makes people blind, Evelyn. Love makes people see clearly," she countered, "and I see a man who's beating himself up for making an impossible choice. Sergei would have killed you, killed us both. You stopped him using the only weapon available. That doesn't make you a monster. It makes you a survivor." "At what cost?" "At the cost of your peace of mind, apparently." Evelyn took his hand. "Adrian, I can't tell you how to feel about what happened, can't make the guilt go away. But I can tell you that you're not your uncle. The fact that this is keeping you up at night proves it. Sergei would be sleeping just fine." He pulled her close, pressing his face into her hair. "I don't know how you do it, how you see all the dark parts of me and still choose to stay. Because the dark parts aren't all of you, they're just the parts you think define you." She turned to look at him. "I see the man who plays piano when he can't sleep, who calls his mother's favorite restaurant before making reservations to make sure they still have her favorite dish, who gave his niece protection even though it would have been easier to just let her disappear. That's who you are, Adrian. The rest is just survival." His eyes searched hers. "When did you get so wise?" "When I fell into the lap of a crime boss and decided to stay." She kissed him softly. "Now come to bed. We have the Yamamoto renegotiation in the morning, and I need you sharp." "The Yamamoto deal is yours. You don't need me there." "I want you there anyway." They went back to bed, and Adrian actually slept for a few hours. It wasn't much, but it was progress. The Yamamoto renegotiation was Evelyn's biggest test yet. The Tokyo partnership that had fallen through under James Reeves was back on the table, but only if Evelyn could convince them that Adrian's organization was stable despite the recent upheaval. She'd spent 2 weeks preparing, researching Japanese business culture, learning key phrases, understanding exactly what Yamamoto Industries needed to hear. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. At 8:30, Adrian's phone rang. "It's Dmitri," he said, checking the caller ID. "I need to take this." Evelyn nodded, reviewing her notes one last time while Adrian spoke in rapid Russian. She caught enough words to understand it was about the Petrov shipping routes, something about a customs holdup in Long Beach. Adrian hung up, looking frustrated. "There's a problem with the shipment we negotiated. I need to handle this personally or we lose the entire contract." "Go! I can handle Yamamoto." "Are you sure?" Evelyn stood, smoothing her dress. "You said yourself this deal is mine. Time to prove you right." Pride flickered in his expression. "You're going to be brilliant." He was right. The Yamamoto executives arrived at exactly 9. 3 men in impeccable suits who bowed precisely and exchanged business cards with the kind of formality that signaled this was a test. Evelyn returned their bows at the exact correct angle, presented her card with both hands, and launched into a presentation that she'd rehearsed until every word felt natural. She spoke about stability and vision, about long-term partnerships and mutual growth. She acknowledged the previous failure directly. No excuses, just honest assessment of what had gone wrong and concrete plans for how it wouldn't happen again. She presented financial projections that were conservative but promising and answered every question with the kind of detailed knowledge that proved she'd done her homework. 2 hours later, they shook hands on a deal worth $15 million over 3 years. Evelyn was reviewing the signed contracts when Adrian returned, looking harried but pleased. "The Petrov situation?" she asked. "Handled. Turned out to be a clerical error, but Dmitri wanted personal assurance we weren't trying to shortchange him." Adrian noticed the papers spread across the conference table. "How did it go with Yamamoto?" "See for yourself." She handed him the contract. He read through it, his expression shifting from curious to impressed to something that looked like awe. "Evelyn, these terms are better than what we originally proposed. How did you—" I listened. Really listened to what they needed versus what they said they needed. She felt a smile tugging at her lips. Turns out they were less concerned about profit margins and more concerned about reliable shipping schedules. I guaranteed priority processing and gave them direct access to our logistics team. Cost us almost nothing in real terms, but gave them exactly what they valued. Adrian set down the contract and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like pride and something deeper. "You're extraordinary. You know that? I'm learning from the best." "No, you're surpassing the best." He held her face in his hands. "I couldn't have negotiated this better myself, maybe not even as well." The admission meant everything. This wasn't just professional validation, it was Adrian acknowledging that she'd grown into the role he'd given her, had earned her place through skill rather than proximity. "We should celebrate," he said. "Tonight. Right now I have the Chen manufacturing meeting at 2. You're already booked solid?" He looked at her schedule on the tablet she'd left on the table. "When did you become busier than me?" "When I stopped being invisible." She kissed him once more, quick and confident. "Now go handle whatever crisis is inevitably waiting in your inbox. I'll see you tonight." She left him standing in the conference room, looking like a man who'd just realized something important. The realization came to Adrian fully formed that evening, watching Evelyn negotiate with a supplier over video conference. She was sharp, confident, commanding in a way that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with who she'd become. Somewhere in the last few months, while he'd been focused on surviving Sergei's vendetta, Evelyn had transformed from a talented assistant into a legitimate business leader. She didn't need him anymore. Not professionally, anyway. The thought should have bothered him. Instead, it felt like relief. "You're staring," Evelyn said after ending the call. "I'm admiring." "There's a difference?" "Absolutely." Adrian crossed to where she sat at the desk in what had become her home office. "I'm realizing that I gave you this position thinking I was doing you a favor. Turns out you were doing me one by accepting it." "That's not true." "It is. You've doubled our legitimate revenue in 4 months, closed deals I couldn't have closed, built relationships with people who wouldn't give me the time of day." He pulled her to her feet. "You've made this organization better, Evelyn. Made me better." She studied his face. "Where is this coming from?" "From watching you thrive. From realizing that you chose to stay not because you needed me, but because you wanted me." His hands settled on her waist. "There's a difference." "Adrian, marry me." The words hung in the air between them. Evelyn's eyes went wide. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, and now that he'd said it, the certainty settled into his bones. "Not because it makes sense for the business, or because we live together, or because it's the next logical step. Marry me because I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life watching you be extraordinary." "You're serious?" "Completely." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I don't have a ring. Didn't plan this. But I've never been more sure of anything." Evelyn's hands came up to frame his face, her eyes suspiciously bright. "You're asking me to marry you in my home office on a Wednesday night. I'm asking you to marry me right here, right now, in the middle of our ordinary life." He kissed her forehead. "Because this is what I want. The meetings and the negotiations and the late nights working side by side. The arguments about strategy and the victories we share. All of it, with you, for as long as you'll have me." "What about the danger? Sergei might be gone, but you said yourself you have other enemies." "There will always be risk. Always be people who want to hurt me or use you to get to me." His voice was steady. "But I'd rather face that risk with you as my wife than spend another day pretending I'm not completely, irrevocably yours." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, and Adrian felt something close to panic. Maybe it was too soon. Maybe she wasn't ready. Maybe... "Yes." "Yes?" "Yes. I'll marry you." She was crying now, but smiling through it. In our home office on a Wednesday night without a ring or a plan or anything except the absolute certainty that I want this too. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, tasting salt from her tears and the promise of everything they were choosing to build together. When they finally broke apart, both of them were laughing. "I'm getting you a ring," Adrian said. "A proper one. Not one of those obscene rocks that looks like a down payment on a house, but something that actually means something." "I don't need a ring. I need to give you one." He pulled her close. "Let me do this right, Evelyn. Let me show you and everyone else that you're choosing me just as much as I'm choosing you." "Okay," she whispered. "But Adrian, I don't want a big wedding. Don't want the spectacle or the performance. Just us and the people who matter." "Deal." They told Rachel first over drinks at Rosie's the following week. Adrian had insisted on coming, said he wanted to look Evelyn's best friend in the eye when he promised to take care of her. "Married?" Rachel repeated, looking between them. "You're getting married." "We are," Evelyn confirmed, showing off the ring Adrian had presented her with 3 days ago. A simple platinum band with a single emerald that matched her eyes. Rachel took a long drink of her wine. Okay, I'm going to say something, and you're going to let me finish before you respond." "Rachel, let me finish." She looked at Adrian. 6 months ago, my best friend was invisible. Careful, safe and small, and convinced that was all she deserved. Then she literally fell into your lap, and I watched her become someone I barely recognized, someone bolder, sharper, more alive. Rachel's voice cracked slightly. "And I've been terrified the whole time that you were going to break her, use her up and throw her away like powerful men do." Adrian started to speak, but Rachel held up a hand. "But watching you two together, seeing how you look at her like she hung the moon, seeing how she challenges you and you let her, I think maybe I was wrong." She turned to Evelyn. "You love him, really love him, not the power or the money or the excitement. Him." "I do," Evelyn said quietly. "And you?" Rachel looked at Adrian. "You love her enough to let her be her own person, to give her power instead of trying to control her. That's rare. Maybe rare enough to be worth the risk." "I'm not going to hurt her," Adrian said. "Not if I can help it." "You're going to hurt each other. That's what people who love each other do." Rachel raised her glass. "But if you can hurt each other and still choose to stay, then maybe you've got something real." She looked at them both. "To falling into the right lap at the right time, and to having the courage to stay there." They clinked glasses, and Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. Rachel's approval mattered more than she'd admitted to herself. They told the office through official announcement, a memo that went out on a Friday afternoon informing staff that Adrian Volkov and Evelyn Carter were engaged and would be married in a private ceremony the following month. The reaction was mixed. Some people were genuinely happy. Others were calculating how this changed the power dynamics. A few were bitter about the confirmation of what they'd suspected all along. James Reeves actually congratulated them, though his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Guess this makes it official. You're really running things now." "I was running things before," Evelyn said calmly. "The ring just makes it harder for people to pretend otherwise." To her surprise, James laughed. "Fair enough. For what it's worth, Carter, you've earned it. I was wrong about you." "I know. Confident now, too. Adrian's rubbing off on you. Or maybe I was always confident and you just never bothered to notice." James nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe that." The wedding planning was simpler than Evelyn expected. They chose a small venue in the countryside, invited 50 people who actually mattered, and hired a planner to handle the logistics so they could focus on work. Adrian insisted on only one thing, that the ceremony be in the same conference room where Evelyn had fallen into his lap. "You're joking," she said when he suggested it. "I'm completely serious. That's where this started, where everything changed." He pulled her into his arms. "I want to marry you in the place where I first understood I was falling in love with you." "You knew that day?" "I suspected. The certainty came later, but that moment, when you were in my lap and looked at me like I was just a man instead of a monster, that's when I knew you were different." So they transformed the 42nd floor conference room into a wedding venue. White flowers, soft lighting, the same floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Simple and perfect and completely them. The night before the wedding, Adrian found Evelyn standing in that same conference room, looking out at the city lights. "Having second thoughts?" he asked, coming to stand beside her.
No, just thinking about how much has changed. She leaned into him. A year ago, I was invisible. Now I'm about to marry the most feared man in the city and run half his empire. Our empire, Adrian corrected. Equal partners, remember? Equal partners. She smiled at the reminder. You know what's funny? I spent so long being careful, trying to stay safe. And the moment I stopped, the moment I literally fell, everything I actually wanted came rushing in. Think there's a lesson in that?
Probably. Something about how safety is overrated and sometimes you have to risk everything to find out who you actually are. She turned to face him. Are you scared? About tomorrow? Terrified, he admitted. Not about marrying you, about being worthy of you choosing me. Adrian, you've always been worthy. You just didn't believe it. I'm starting to. He kissed her softly. Thanks to you. They stood there in the empty conference room, holding each other in the space where everything had begun, and Evelyn felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. The wedding itself was perfect in its imperfection. Rachel cried through the entire ceremony. Dmitry Petrov gave a toast in broken English about how Adrian had finally found someone as ruthless as himself, which got more laughs than it probably should have. Victor stood as best man and got choked up during his speech about watching his boss fall in love. And when Adrian and Evelyn stood in front of 50 people who mattered and promised to choose each other every day for the rest of their lives, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. I promise to see you, Adrian said during his vows, abandoning the script they'd written. Really see you, not just as my partner or my wife, but as Evelyn, brilliant, fierce, brave enough to fall, and strong enough to stay. I promise to never take that for granted, to never make you invisible, to give you space to grow and change and become whoever you're meant to be, even if that means growing beyond me. Evelyn was crying openly now. I promise to challenge you, to call you on your bullshit and hold you accountable and remind you that you're human when the world tells you you're a monster. I promise to be your partner in everything, the victories and the failures, the easy days and the impossible ones. I promise to choose you every single day, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, even when every logical part of my brain says I should run. Even when you fall, Adrian asked, the corner of his mouth quirking up. Especially when I fall. They kissed before the officiant could tell them to, and the room erupted in applause. The reception was held in the penthouse, converted for the night into a celebration space. Music played. People danced. Adrian introduced Evelyn to contacts from all over the world as my wife, my partner, and the person who runs this organization better than I ever could. She corrected him every time. We run it together. We run it together, he agreed, and the pride in his voice made her heart ache in the best way. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had left, Evelyn found herself back in the conference room with Adrian. Someone had already started taking down the decorations, but the flowers remained, and the city lights still glittered below. We did it, she said, leaning against the window. We did. Adrian wrapped his arms around her from behind. How does it feel, being Mrs. Volkov? Strange. Good, strange. She turned in his arms. I'm keeping Carter professionally, though. I've built a reputation with that name. I wouldn't expect anything else. He kissed her forehead. You're your own person, Evelyn. The ring doesn't change that. What does it change? Nothing. Everything. He considered the question. It means when things get hard, and they will, we've made a promise to work through it instead of walking away. It means I get to wake up next to you for the rest of my life knowing you chose this deliberately, not just because it was convenient or exciting. It was never convenient, Evelyn pointed out. Exactly, which makes it real. They stood there looking out at the city they'd claimed together, and Evelyn thought about the journey that had brought them here. The broken heel, the dangerous attraction, the violence and fear and moments of absolute terror, the slow transformation from invisible to essential, from careful to courageous. Do you regret it? Adrian asked quietly, reading her thoughts. Any of it? No, not even the scary parts. Not even the bomb? Not even the bomb. She looked up at him. Because all of it led here. To this. To us choosing each other with full knowledge of what that means. And what does it mean? It means we're in this together. The business and the danger and the ordinary moments and everything in between. She kissed him softly. It means I trust you with all of me. The parts that are strong and the parts that are still learning how to be brave. And it means I'm done hiding, done playing it safe, done being anything less than exactly who I am. Who are you, Evelyn Volkov? The name sounded right in his voice. She smiled. I'm someone who fell into the right lap and had the courage to stay. Someone who chose love over safety, risk over regret. Someone who's still figuring it out but doing it alongside the person who sees her most clearly. That's a good answer. I know. They went back to the reception, to their guests, and their life, and the future they were building together. And later, much later, when everyone had finally left, and it was just the two of them in the penthouse they'd made a home, Adrian played piano while Evelyn curled up on the couch and listened. The music was still imperfect, still marked by occasional stumbles, but it was beautiful in its honesty. Just like them. Just like everything they'd built together. 3 years later, Evelyn stood in that same conference room, now officially named the Carter Volkov Strategy Center, and looked out at the city that had witnessed their beginning. The empire they ran together had grown exponentially. They'd opened offices in Tokyo and London, had weathered 2 more federal investigations and 1 attempted hostile takeover, had learned how to fight fair and forgive quickly and choose each other even when it was hard. Adrian found her there, as he often did, drawn by some invisible thread that connected them. Thinking about that day, he asked, coming to stand beside her. Always. She leaned into him. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if my heel hadn't broken? If I hadn't fallen? All the time. Then I remember that you were always going to fall. That moment was just fate catching up to inevitability. That's very poetic for a crime boss. Former crime boss, he corrected. I'm legitimate now, remember? Mostly. Mostly, she laughed. The mostly is important. His hand found hers, his thumb tracing the platinum band she still wore. I have a confession. Oh? I'm the one who broke your heel. Evelyn turned to stare at him. What? Not directly, but I may have asked maintenance to make sure the conference room floors were freshly polished that morning. May have known that your heels were old, and the extra slip might cause you to stumble. His eyes held hers. May have engineered the whole thing, because I'd been watching you for months and couldn't figure out any other way to get close to you. Adrian Volkov. Evelyn didn't know whether to laugh or hit him. You sabotaged my shoe? I created an opportunity? You chose to fall. He pulled her closer. Though in my defense, I didn't expect you to land quite so perfectly in my lap. That was just luck. Or fate. Or fate, he agreed. Evelyn shook her head, but she was smiling. You're lucky I love you. I'm lucky you stayed. He kissed her, soft and certain. Thank you, Evelyn, for falling, for staying, for choosing me every day even when I give you reasons not to. Thank you for catching me. They stood there in the conference room where it had all begun, surrounded by the life they'd built from a single moment of manufactured chaos and genuine choice. And Evelyn understood with complete clarity that some falls aren't accidents at all. Some falls are fate disguised as chance, giving you exactly what you need in the form you least expect. Some falls are invitations to stop playing it safe and start living fully. Some falls are the beginning of everything you didn't know you were brave enough to want. And some falls land you exactly where you belong, in the arms of someone who sees you, challenges you, loves you fiercely and without reservation. Evelyn had fallen into Adrian's lap on a random Tuesday afternoon, and in doing so, had fallen into a life she chose deliberately, courageously, every single day. She wouldn't change a single moment, not the fear or the danger or the time she'd questioned everything, because all of it had led her here, to this man, this partnership, this love that was messy and complicated and absolutely real. Adrian's hand tightened on hers, and she knew he was thinking the same thing. They'd both stopped falling long ago. Now they were just flying,